Our story begins with a sweeping view of Los Angeles Bay on the morning of Valentine's Day, with everyone in the city from West Beach to Beverly Hills getting in the holiday mood. We see Reed Bennett in bed with his girlfriend Morley, turning over an engagement ring in his hand, seemingly trying to summon the courage to pop the big question. He sneaks around the bed, careful not to wake her up, and tries to surprise her by putting the ring under her pillow. However, his plans are foiled as she moves in her sleep and awakens, so he quickly improvises, dropping to one knee and fumbling over his words as he delivers a heartwarming speech. Morley agrees happily, slipping the ring onto her finger, and Reed celebrates triumphantly as he leaves for work. He calls his friend Julia to leave her a message, then happily greets his colleague Alfonso with the news of his engagement. He's thrilled for Reed, although surprised that Morley said yes, and claps him on the back as they get into their van. The pair work together delivering flowers, so it's a very big day for them. Reed is over the moon, giddy and romantic, and sure everyone else is going to be feeling the same way. It's Valentine's Day after all. The scene changes, and we see the set of the local news station, where Kelvin, a journalist, is arguing with his boss Susan. He's a sports journalist, but he's been assigned to do a romantic lifestyle piece about the holiday. He's a big skeptic, believing it's not a real holiday, and complaining that he deliberately stops dating every year from January to March just to avoid having a girlfriend on Valentine's. However, Susan is having none of his objections, sending him away in a huff. Meanwhile, at the flower market downtown, we check back in with the ecstatic Reed, who is riding a shopping trolley around and buying up everything at the stalls. He greets his friend Simon, who is very excited to announce he's going to be on television, indicating some reporters setting up nearby. Like Alfonso, Simon is also surprised to hear that Morley said yes to Reed's proposal. A strange coincidence. Reed brushes it off though, too over the moon to let himself be brought down, and asks Simon for something special to give Morley. Simon hands him a silver box, but when he goes to open it, his friend stops him, making him promise not to open it until the perfect moment. Just then, the reporters indicate they are ready to begin, and it turns out that Simon is featuring in Kelvin's reluctant fluff piece. However, Simon doesn't answer Kelvin's questions well, so Reed steps in to help, recognizing Kelvin from the sports section. He advertises his flower shop on live morning TV. Today just seems to be Reed's perfect day. Let's see how long that lasts. Next, we turn to the story of Dr. Harrison Copeland, who's busy getting up and ready for work with Julia, the friend Reed called earlier on. She complains about how often he's out of town since he's leaving her on Valentine's Day for work reasons. He leaves her with a silly wind-up toy and promises he'll be back the following day. Julia is understandably unhappy, but tries to make the best of it, considering going to her friend Kara's I Hate Valentine's Day bash that evening. Apparently it's an annual thing, but it's kind of a bummer so she doesn't usually enjoy going. But with that said, it's not like she has much else to do, since Harrison is away. After she leaves, Harrison glances at the TV where Reed's interview with Kelvin is being played. Reed is happily declaring his full belief in the power of love. As the shops begin to open for the day, there's another couple ready to rise and shine. Liz is taking photographs of her date Jason in bed as they laugh and cuddle after a great night. She suddenly sees the time, and her demeanor does a swift 180, as she rushes around trying to find her clothes, preoccupied with fleeing out of the door as quickly as possible. Jason is left dumbfounded as she leaves in a whirlwind, wondering what could make her so busy. She takes off on a motorcycle, pulling over to answer her phone as soon as she's round the corner. It becomes quickly apparent why she was in such a rush. She puts on a husky, exaggerated voice as she answers, calling herself Katya, and lying that she's touching herself, claiming her roommate is coming to join her and the caller in a threesome. It looks like Liz works for an erotic phone service, not the easiest career to announce on a first date. She takes the call in the street, thoroughly embarrassed. Meanwhile, Edgar and his wife Estelle exchange gifts while their grandson Edison makes cards in the kitchen. Valentine's Day is a difficult day for a young child, whose mother is always away. He tells his grandfather he's lovesick as he concentrates on coloring. Elsewhere in the city, Julia gets into an elevator while listening back to all the messages Reed has left for her that morning. She is joined by a girl named Felicia, with a gigantic teddy bear, a gift from her significant other, who proceeds to tell her the whole story, while Julia tries to ignore her mounting jealousy. After all, her boyfriend has left her all alone. Next, we find ourselves aboard a flight bound for Los Angeles, where a woman is sleeping soundly on a man's shoulder. More on that later, I suppose, as we then skip back to Reed's florist shop, which is abuzz with activity after his hit TV appearance that morning. Julia arrives, rushing in and trying to find Reed amid all the chaos. He didn't tell her anything in his messages, so she, like everyone else it seems, is anticipating him being rejected. She is shocked to hear that Morley agreed to marry him, but quickly overcomes her initial surprise and gives her friend a warm hug. Soon the conversation turns to her own love life, and she confides in Reed that Harrison has gone to San Francisco. The giddy romantic, high on his own proposal, convinces her she should fly out to surprise him. Plans like that always go well, right? Sure enough, as Julia calls Harrison to surreptitiously try to find out where he's staying, he lies that he's just pulling into the airport. As his fancy Porsche arrives at a large house on the other side of town, he slips his wedding ring on as he heads inside, greeting his wife and daughter, both of whom seem delighted to see him, and completely oblivious to the fact that he is having an affair. Back on the flight, the rising sun awakens the man, Holden, who realizes he has a strange woman sleeping on his shoulder and tries to move around without waking her up to close the window. Unfortunately, though, she jumps awake, and he recognizes her military uniform. She's on active duty, a captain in the U.S. military, Kate Hazeltine. He tries to make small talk with her, asking her about her trip home, and she reveals she's coming back for just one night. He commends her commitment to her mystery partner, but Kate refuses to give him any more information, just smiling at his assumptions. Morley comes to visit Reed at work, and he spins her around happily, only to sit down with her at a table and notice she's not wearing the ring he gave her. She apologizes, looking disturbed, and admits that she'd rather not have all the fuss at work. She wants to keep things a secret for now because she doesn't want probing questions from everyone. Reed's disappointment is palpable, but before they can discuss it further, one of his colleagues rushes over and congratulates them, revealing Reed has already spilled the beans. He looks apologetically over at Morley, who obviously feels very awkward. It's clear these two haven't really thought about their future together. They're completely different people. Next, we check back in with Edgar, who is driving Edison to school. He tells his grandson the story of how he met Estelle, and Edison is enthralled. They stop off at the flower shop, where Edison chooses a card and confidently orders a dozen red roses for his crush. The small pile of single-dollar bills and change he presents is not even close to the amount it costs, but the ever-romantic Reed takes pity on him and agrees to the sale. He promises to deliver them to Edison's school at recess. In the mailroom of his office building, Jason is lamenting his encounter with Liz to a colleague. You'll remember she rushed out of his apartment to go and answer the phone. Jason is concerned that she might have been disappointed with his performance in bed. His crushing doubts are interrupted when another colleague strides in with a ton of roses that have just been delivered, and Jason suddenly realizes it's Valentine's Day. He comes to the completely wrong conclusion that she's upset with him for not planning anything, and decides to act. Liz herself is at her real job as a receptionist, where she's subbing in for someone who took a day off. She's booking in another adult phone call for later, when her boss Paula comes in. Paula seems to be a very forthright and outspoken woman, quickly laying down the law, but she likes Liz's attitude, and Liz breathes a sigh of relief at her very close escape. Out on the glorious Malibu sand, athlete Sean Jackson is about to finish up his morning swim, heading back into his swanky beachside villa, just as the newscaster on TV is announcing his devastating loss in a recent championship game. It seems like he's about to age out of football, and his contract may not be renewed. He doesn't seem bothered about the potential end of his career, though, leaning out over his luxurious balcony and chatting with some girls on the sand. He then makes a call to Kara Monahan, his PR agent, and if you recall, Julia's lonely friend, who hosts I Hate Valentine's Day dinners. Kara is exercising in her office and is unable to get off the treadmill in time before answering the call. Sean asks her to meet him and his agent in an hour to deal with the media situation, but Kara is distracted by the fact that not a single person has responded to her dinner invitation this year. She's clearly very upset at the fact that her friends might have moved on, and she's the only one alone. At the local high school, a girl named Grace is approached by a classmate who wants to ask her for help with a project. She admits that she can't help her out today because she's about to lose her virginity to her boyfriend. The aforementioned boyfriend, Alex, is talking nervously to his friend Willie, hyping himself up for the first time, while Grace talks candidly to Felicia, the girl from the elevator earlier, who is still carrying around her gigantic bear. Both continue to receive extremely dubious advice from their teenage friends until they eventually meet up. The lovebirds take off, leaving Willie and Felicia alone together. It turns out these two are also dating, and Willie hints that he'd also like to take the same step. Felicia quickly diverts his attention to the gift she got him, which turns out to be Willie's track shirt with her lucky number ironed on the back. He tries his best to hide his disappointment, especially given all the effort he went to with the gigantic bear. He feels a bit let down that she can't make the same effort. We return to Sean's story. He is in the meeting with Kara and his agent, who turns out to be none other than Paula. Things aren't looking good for his football career, and Sean is thinking retirement might be the best option, to bow out gracefully and focus on other areas of his life. Paula isn't happy, but Kara suggests giving him time to think about it. Meanwhile, on the plane, Kate and Holden are now getting along famously, playing a game together. Kate gives her assessment of the man in front of her, quickly sussing out that he has issues with romance, and Holden is impressed with her sound judgment. It looks like she has him pegged, but he's still struggling to figure out the life of the mysterious soldier. In school, Julia is teaching what turns out to be Edison's primary class. She gives them a speech about the history of Valentine's Day. Edison's secretly smiling as he thinks about the surprise he's organized for his crush later on. One of the kids asks Julia out of the blue if she's in love with someone, and she stops, startled, unsure how to answer. Does she love the doctor? Enough to actually go through with the plan to fly to San Francisco for him? Before we find out her answer, we are taken back to Reed's shop. Coincidentally, the doctor himself is there, having seen it on TV that morning in the hotel room. But is he buying flowers for his wife, or his girlfriend? Turns out it's both. Reed isn't happy with selling flowers to two different women, but he agrees. It's something that happens often in his business. However, as soon as he sees the man's debit card, everything falls into place as he realizes that this is Julia's boyfriend, and she has no idea that he's married. He tries his best to hide how gutted he is for his friend, not wanting Harrison to cotton on. Alex heads to Grace's house for their lunchtime tryst, letting himself in with the spare key, and setting up a romantic scene in the bedroom ready for her to arrive. He practices a song he wrote for her and takes all his clothes off, posing romantically. Just as Grace's mom happens to arrive home downstairs, she hears the music and comes up to investigate, understandably shocked when she sees her daughter's boyfriend in her room. She's remarkably calm as he stutters out an explanation, but Alex is beyond mortified and rushes hastily out of the door and down the street without even putting his clothes back on. Luckily, Grace is just around the corner, and he jumps into her car as she turns around to take them back to school. Liz just about finishes off one of her calls as Jason appears at her desk. It seems that he works in her building, and that's how the two originally met. She's delighted that he came to see her, and happily agrees to a dinner date later that evening, to make up for having to leave so quickly earlier. Jason is quickly chased away by Paula, who comes clean to Liz she knows about all the dirty calls she's been taking all morning. Surprisingly, she's okay with it, as long as it doesn't interfere with her day job, but Liz is still extremely embarrassed. Next, we head back to Sean, who is driving through town listening to a radio show about his pending retirement and not paying attention to the road. He crashes right into the back of Alfonso's flower truck. Alfonso is upset with the damage until he finds out who hit him, and then is all smiles. He's a big fan of Sean's. Still, Sean feels bad because the van is messed up, and Alfonso's deliveries are going to go late. He puts in a call to Kara as he takes off, but as Alfonso drives away, all the flowers fly out of the back of the van. What a complete disaster. Back at the store, they're transferring the rest of the deliveries into a backup van. Reed is less distressed about the damage and more about Julia's situation. Unsure whether he should tell her about Harrison's infidelity, he decides he's going to do it and delivers the flowers to her personally in the next scene. Edison sees him and stands up, but it quickly becomes evident it's not his delivery yet. Reed takes Julia into the hallway and tries to convince her not to get a flight, but it's too late. She's already booked one. She's confused when he tries to go back on his own romantic idea, not reading the difficult emotions behind his demeanor, and wrongly assuming he's worried about their friendship changing as a result of her finding love. Before Reed can correct her, the class begins to get rowdy, and she has to rush back, leaving him alone in the hallway, unable to say the words she needs to hear. Alfonso is disappointed in him as they drive away, but Reed protests that he just couldn't bring himself to ruin Valentine's Day for his friend. As if her day isn't going to be completely ruined when she turns up in San Francisco to find out that her boyfriend isn't there. At recess, Edison gets into Grace's car, extremely sad that his flowers didn't show up yet. She takes him off to soccer practice, promising to help. Meanwhile, Julia calls Kara, who is still depressed that nobody's coming to her party. Reed arrives home with a surprise gift for Morley, only to find her in the middle of packing up all her things. She looks at him with wounded eyes, trying to explain herself. She just feels like they're too different. She was shocked this morning when he asked her, and happy, but throughout the day it's become more and more real to her, and she knows now that she isn't ready for this kind of commitment, and she doesn't think they're right for each other. Reed is understandably heartbroken, as even his dog runs to Morley's side. Morley calls out one last time as he walks away, claiming that she considered his proposal, but that's exactly what's wrong. When it's the right person at the right time, they'll just know. There's nothing to consider. Reed takes one last look at the girl of his dreams and the life he thought he would have, smiling sadly to himself as he realizes that his romantic ideals were always just a fantasy. He heads out to the bridge outside, where Alfonso is fishing. He's not surprised to find out that Morley dumped him, and Reed blows up at his friend, irritated that everyone was expecting her to say no, that all of his friends knew something was wrong and nobody told him. Hearing his own words, he realizes that he has to stop Julia from going to San Francisco, no matter what. After all, it's not like they still have deliveries to make today, or that it's rush hour on the busiest day of the year. Plenty of time for all the personal errands in the world. Luckily, Alfonso volunteers to finish off the deliveries for the day, as Reed borrows his cousin's awful pink Chevy and drives to the airport to stop her. He rushes over to the desk, begging the man to give him a ticket to get through security. Initially, he's reluctant, but Reed confesses the reason why he needs to stop Julia, and the shine in his eyes as he talks about the girl convinces the worker to help him. Could it be that Reed's feelings for Julia truly do run deeper than friendship? He rushes barefoot past security to reach her just as she is about to board, but in a surprise twist, she doesn't believe him. It turns out that Reed has systematically had issues with every one of Julia's past boyfriends, and it's a case of crying wolf. She thinks he's projecting his own issues onto her, firmly convinced that Harrison is divorced. Reed asks her for her real opinion on Morley, trying to make her see that he's saving her from the same heartbreak he's currently experiencing. But she refuses to believe him, and boards the flight as Reed is led away, defeated and helpless. Meanwhile, Kate's putting on makeup as the flight nears Los Angeles. Holden compliments her as she sits back down, and she admits she's nervous to arrive, although she still doesn't say why. Miles below, at soccer practice, Edison is still feeling down about the fact that his flowers didn't come. His friend Ronnie informs him, while they warm up together, that they are hosting a party in her mother's restaurant that night for all of Julia's friends, presumably Kara's party. He looks over at Grace, watching from the sidelines as all the other kids celebrate with their parents, feeling very alone. Next we check back in with Kelvin. It's been a minute, and he's still on the Valentine's Day fluff trail, reporting about the romance movies showing at the cinema. As he does, a woman rushes past him and makes a huge scene, kicking her cheating partner in the balls. He suddenly receives a text that Sean Jackson is doing a press conference and rushes over to Kara's office to try and get the scoop. This could be what he needs to become the #1 sports reporter for his channel. He barges his way into her office, past her protesting secretary, and finds her on the floor in a miserable mood. Kelvin tries to talk to her about the interview, but she's so emotional, she ends up ranting about her loneliness and eventually falling on top of him on the couch. This seems to snap her out of whatever neuroticism she was experiencing, and she awkwardly sends Kelvin away. Willie is running track in his new lucky number shirt, as Felicia gives an interview to Kelvin's understudy, who's continuing to run the romance piece while he chases Sean. Willie comes over and gives Felicia a loving kiss. He asks them what they love about each other, and while Willie's answers are all based on her personality, Felicia's are very shallow. He tries not to act perturbed about it, demonstrating his athleticism for the camera at her request. She tells the camera the ridiculous and somewhat gross story of how they met, when Willie spat gum in her hair to get her attention, and they make out in front of the reporters. Young love, right? Sadly, Edison receives some bad news when he gets home. Grace drops him off and his grandfather tells him his flowers won't come today. He rushes off crying, and they decide to give him some time to process it. Grace confides her own situation in the older couple, wondering if it's really the right thing for her and Alex to take things to the next level when they won't be going to the same college. Edgar and Estelle are very supportive, but Estelle seems to be holding something back when Edgar proudly pronounces that they've never been intimate with anyone but each other. She gets up and promptly leaves, just as Grace gets a call. While talking to Alex, Grace doesn't notice Edison slipping down the stairs and out of the house. He grabs his bicycle and rides away before she can catch him. She gets in her car to chase him down, while Edgar and Estelle are having a conversation in another room. Estelle shakingly admits to Edgar that she had an affair with his business partner many years ago. It was short-lived and they both regretted it, so they never said anything, but she can't keep quiet anymore. Edgar is understandably shell-shocked at the news, forced to reconsider years of their marriage. What else has she been hiding from him? Back on the flight to Los Angeles, Kate asks Holden about his romantic issues. He's firmly convinced he's going to stay single because he has just recently been going through some issues with his partner, but she jokes with him about dating the stewardess who is watching him carefully from down the aisle. He laughs, as, just like Kate predicted, she comes over on the pretext of checking on them. The two of them are getting along like a house on fire after spending almost 14 hours together on a plane. Wouldn't it be nice if we were all so lucky with our travel companions? Julia, as it turns out, didn't end up getting on the flight after all. Reed put some doubts in her head, so she headed instead to the hospital where Harrison works, to ask him for the truth. However, she's told, surprise, surprise, that he's not on duty. Realizing that Reed was right, Julia asks the receptionist, who tells her that Dr. Copeland and his wife just celebrated their 15th anniversary. Distraught and humiliated, Julia tears up, and an older nurse takes pity on her, telling her where she can find him. She calls Kara on her way out of the hospital, letting her know she'll be coming to her "I hate Valentine's Day" party after all. It's finally time for Sean's press conference. Kelvin is in attendance as the athlete takes the stage ready to deliver his speech. He catches Kara's gaze and they both look away awkwardly, remembering their altercation earlier on. Sean begins speaking, lamenting the fact that he hasn't had a chance to live the life he always wanted to live because of his football career. He proudly announces that he's gay. The reporters all jump up in shock, asking a million questions a minute, but Kara allows only one, from Kelvin. He asks whether Sean is actually retiring, and the footballer confirms he's going to stay in the game, but he needs to get this off his chest first, so he can finally be himself both on and off the field. Grace is frantically driving around trying to find Edison, calling Estelle and Edgar who are not picking up. She drives past the restaurant where Harrison is having dinner with his wife, and where Julia has just arrived. She marches over to their table and pretends to be their waitress for the evening, letting Harrison know she's found him out and essentially giving him an ultimatum to tell his wife. She hands the borrowed uniform back to her friend at the entrance, breathless with adrenaline, and takes 2 orders of lobster to go, charged to Harrison's table. Kara arrives at the restaurant with all her accoutrements for the party and starts setting up, while across town Liz is meeting Jason for dinner. She is really happy to be meeting him, but still can't seem to find the words to tell him about her secret job, especially not since the place he's chosen is very close quarters with many other diners able to listen in. Cue her phone, and she has to run outside to take another adult call right in the middle of the date. She better be earning good money from her side hustle to be worth all this stress. Morley checks into a hotel with Carmine as Reed and Alfonso walk down the road, still delivering the last of the flowers for the day. Reed is feeling down about not having stopped Julia, but Alfonso cheers him up by reciting some love poetry and reminding him that Julia isn't in love with the doctor. No matter what, she'll pick herself back up. Reed questions how Alfonso and his wife managed to get it right, and he laughs, admitting he took the easy way and married his best friend. This gets the gears in Reed's head turning, and he begins to realize that perhaps the fact he's been thinking about Julia all day, and not Morley, might mean something important. Alfonso heads into the house as Reed watches his friend's happy family from the van, suddenly knowing what he has to do. Kate and Holden's flight finally lands, and they bid each other farewell at the airport. Holden is met by his driver, but he notices a stressed Kate at the counter and waits to ensure she gets out of the airport all right. Unfortunately, it seems there's some issue with her transport, so he gallantly allows her to take his driver, knowing she only has a few hours to see the person she came back for. Kate is beyond grateful and kisses him on the cheek as she leaves, still not telling him anything about the identity of the mystery man. Holden wishes her well, watching her go with a hopeful smile. At Ronnie's mother's restaurant, Kara is setting up her displays while Ronnie sullenly organizes the cutlery. Her mother asks her why she's moping, and it seems that the young girl was hoping for a Valentine this year, but didn't get one. Alex comes along, helpfully offering to be her Valentine to cheer her up, but the mother sternly sends him away to do his job, stressed at the number of people they have coming to the restaurant that evening. Apparently they're also hosting an Indian wedding in addition to the party. Meanwhile, Liz is still on the phone with her latest caller, who seems to be taking a long time to finish. Jason comes out looking for her and overhears the end of the conversation, leaving her mortified when she realizes he's standing there. She pleads her case to him, promising it's just a job, and that she's trying to pay off her student loan. But Jason can't handle the idea of dating someone who works in that industry, so he walks away, leaving Liz thoroughly despondent. Jason heads over to the open-air cinema that he had booked as a surprise, intending to go alone. Edgar is also there, queuing to get a ticket, but they sell out just as he's about to get inside. Jason offers him Liz's ticket, and the two get to talking as they head in, ready to compare who's having the worst Valentine's Day. Meanwhile, Edison arrives at Reed's flower shop, and a guilty Reed grabs the special box that Simon gave him that morning, promising to take the boy wherever he wants to go to deliver it. At the restaurant, Kara is sitting alone at her table when Julia walks in, drops the lobster on some empty chairs, and grabs the bat for the piñata, smashing it to pieces in front of all the guests at the Indian wedding. She's not even got the wherewithal to be embarrassed at her display, dropping down next to her friend after letting out all her rage over her failed relationship. Kara is grateful her friend has come and doesn't ask any questions. Back at the open-air cinema, Edgar and Jason are still chatting. It turns out that Estelle actually starred in the movie that's showing. She was an actress in her youth. Edgar is drinking heavily as he confides in Jason about his own Valentine's woes. At the Indian restaurant, more of Kara's friends arrive at the party one by one. Meanwhile, Grace finally locates Edison and is shocked to see he's in a van with a man she doesn't know. She follows Reed as he drives off. The I Hate Valentine's Day crowd is warring with the happy couple at the wedding as to which party can be the loudest. Kara is surprised when Kelvin shows up out of nowhere, claiming he found her through her secretary and wanted to come by before his late broadcast. Julia comes over, curious, and Kelvin introduces himself as Kara's date, shocking both women. Looks like the man's got a game. Grace finally catches up with Edison as Reed arrives at the restaurant and is angry that he ran away from her, but understands when she realizes he's doing it to give a girl flowers. Edison takes a deep breath, preparing to enter the restaurant and finally deliver his long-awaited gift to his crush. Kate is in traffic in Holden's limousine, anxiously looking out of the window and hoping she'll get back in time. The driver remarks that she's special. Holden has never given up his car for anybody before. The thought makes her smile. Back at the cinema, Estelle has arrived and is combing the crowd calling out for Edgar. It's their yearly tradition, so she knows he's got to be there. Everyone's annoyed as she walks in front of the screen, so shouts soon start up, all the people there begging Edgar to answer her so she'll sit down and stop yelling. He gets up and runs over to her, promising to forgive her for what she did years ago, even as she breaks down and apologizes for hurting him. The two of them share a dramatic movie-style kiss as the younger Estelle flashes on the screen. Seeing the pair reunited, Jason gets up and walks away, knowing he needs to find Liz. Kelvin is entertaining all the ladies at Kara's party with some karaoke, while Julia sits at the bar, contemplating everything that's happened. Ronnie's mother brings Edison over, and he bravely hands Julia the special flowers, asking her to be his Valentine. Julia is flattered by the boy's interest, but kindly redirects him to Ronnie, who is looking over anxiously at the interaction between them. At first, Edison is confused because he doesn't think he loves Ronnie. But when Julia explains to him a little more about how friendship can turn into something else, he asks her if she's ever experienced that feeling. It's at that moment that Julia too realizes that what's between her and Reed is more than either of them has acknowledged. After Kelvin's karaoke, the partygoers are in a much more musical mood and have finally joined in the Indian wedding, dancing their hearts out. Edison finds Ronnie and gives her the flowers instead, and she's secretly delighted, even though the interaction is awkward, as you'd expect from children their age. Grace meets up with Alex, who has prepared a special dinner for them outside in the parking lot since she can't leave Edison alone, but she haltingly confesses she's not ready to go through with their plans. Just because they're going to different colleges doesn't mean they should rush things, just to make it happen sooner. Alex graciously accepts it, and the two of them kiss in the back of his car. Willie drops Felicia off at her apartment, kissing her goodbye as she drags her giant bear inside. Alex cleans up the inside of the restaurant after the party and texts Grace that he will always love her. She smiles, knowing they're ready to face the future together, whatever it might bring for them. Paula picks up the phone at the agency and is surprised to find that it's one of Liz's adult callers. Rather than hang up, she steers into the skid and takes on the role of a dominant African queen, ready to deliver punishment. Reed sits in the dark at the florist's as his last staff member departs for the evening. He's contemplating everything that's happened and wondering what he should do. Does he really love Julia? Or is it just his broken heart rebounding from Morley? He can't afford to take the step without being sure it's what they both want, and he doesn't even know how Julia feels. While he agonizes, Alfonso and his wife swing in their garden while Estelle and Edgar dance on the green, celebrating their successful marriages. Meanwhile, Sean is sleeping in his chair when a man walks in, presenting him with a flower. The mystery lover is revealed to be none other than Holden, who saw Sean's broadcast earlier and is proud that he's publicly out, and they can finally be together for real. Kelvin wraps up the evening news with a message in support of Sean, just as Kara slips into the studio and watches from behind the scenes. Susan is very happy with his broadcast and wishes him a happy Valentine's Day as he heads over to see Kara. Liz is crying in her apartment when Jason knocks on the door. She answers, unamused when he takes a photo of her, mimicking her playful actions that morning. Somehow, even though she's been sobbing, she still looks absolutely perfect. Against her better judgment, she lets him in and apologizes for the fact that he found out about her job in such an awkward way. but she refuses to apologize for doing it. He understands and apologizes himself, explaining what he learned from Edgar, and promising that he wants to do better. He offers her a card he made, claiming he doesn't want to turn his back on love. Liz is charmed and accepts him back, throwing herself at him in a passionate kiss. She tells him she likes things simple, causing him to wave away the musical trio that has just entered the apartment behind him. With that, the two of them start having a very fun time making up for their fight. Having cleaned and closed up shop, Reed is standing on the bridge by his house, the very same place where he spoke with Alfonso a few hours earlier after Morley dumped him. He is tossing flowers one by one into the water. Out of nowhere, Julia finds him. He doesn't seem surprised, watching her with an enigmatic expression. She asks what he's doing, and he explains that he likes to drop the flowers that nobody wants into the river so that people might find them the next day and wonder where they came from. Perhaps they'll have a second life. He used to drop them off at random doorsteps with an anonymous note saying, "Someone out there loves you." But he stopped, because he thought, what if someone found out? Would they want him to be the one that loves them? He looks directly at Julia as he asks this question, and they both know it's not rhetorical. She gazes up at him, and he leans in cautiously. Their lips meet, but almost immediately both draw back. Not a great kiss. Totally and completely awkward. Back at the television studio, Kelvin thanks Kara for her help once again, revealing that Susan is going to give him the chance for the #1 spot. He tries to teach her a fun handshake, but when it utterly fails, he throws caution to the wind and simply leans in to kiss her, leading to the two making out right there on set. Looks like the lonely hearts found each other after all, despite their best efforts. Back with Reed and Julia, they decide that since their first try wasn't great, they're going to have to get a lot more practice at kissing each other. Morley makes a call outside her hotel as Harrison lies in bed alone. Edison is trying to sleep when suddenly Kate sits down on the edge of his bed, grinning as he sits up and hugs her. She made it home before the end of the day to see her mystery man. Edgar and Estelle watch on as she holds her son tightly, making up for all the lost time. Reed and Julia continue chatting, poking fun at each other and flirting before Reed goes in for a proper kiss. This time it goes much better. They wind their arms around each other tightly and give in to the feelings that have been growing between them for years. And so, every couple finds their happy ending as Valentine's Day draws to a close.